Hi, Bill here. I'd like to show you some further checkmate patterns where the defender has a piece or pawn with it. Okay, we'll start by putting the king in the corner because that's going to be the easiest place to mate the king. If I add a pawn here, so in some way that gives the king some cover, but it also takes the square away from the king, which means instead of having to control these 4 squares, white only need to control 3 squares to checkmate. So imagine if the white king's too far away to be part of the action. A single piece can checkmate, unlike the case with a king by itself. You could have a queen on this square. That would be a checkmate. A lone queen mates. All pieces can mate by themselves if the defending king has pieces or pawns hindering it, except for a pawn, because the pawn would need to be defended. Now there's a similar mate to this. If I remove this pawn and put a rook next to the king, the queen can get into there. That would be a checkmate. So it's really the same position flipped around 90 degrees, rotated 90 degrees. So again, the lone queen checkmates. Okay, now if I remove no other piece can do a checkmate by itself. Okay, so we'll put that pawn there. Oops, that should be a black pawn. Okay, now if I had a rook, it's almost mate. Now, normally if the king was here or here, that would be mate without this pawn, but if the king is here or here, we've got a new mate. We could also mate by having the rook on this square. That would be a mate. Okay, we can have a mate if we remove that rook and place a bishop on this diagonal. That would be mate. Could remove that bishop. If I have a pawn goes forward, that would be mate. Okay, so if I remove the king up here and I add a knight, that would be mate. So we're getting mates that weren't possible with against the lone king. Like king and knight cannot mate, but here we see a mate with a knight against the pawn. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the mates where the king is near the king. So I'll move the king a long way away. So if I have 2 bishops, check, that will be a mate. 2 bishops on the 2 diagonals. In fact, I can remove that bishop if I have a pawn here. That would also be a mate. All I have to do is control this square here. So if I place a knight, I can be here or here. That would be a mate because that square is controlled. Or if I place a rook somewhere where it controls the square, that is also a mate. Okay, so that's mates on the diagonal. So what are some others? If instead of a bishop, if I add a knight here, that would be mate. So if I check with the knight, I've got to have both these squares covered. So I can mate with the rook. I can have the rook checking with the knight defending it, or I can have a back rank check where the knight guards this square. So I've got a mate in that sort of situation. Okay, so you have a mate with 2 rooks. So rook and bishop can mate here. You could have the rook there. Guarded by a bishop, that's a mate. Or we could have the bishop checking the king as we saw before. That could be a mate. Then we've got 2 rooks. We can make put a rook here. We can have the rook anywhere on the back rank, and that's a mate. So that's 2 rook checkmates. And of course with a queen, well, so it's pretty much over. A queen can do it mate by itself. So that's pretty much most of the common mates with against the king and a rook's pawn, except if we move the king over one, we're going to get some different types of mates. If I had a queen here, controls all the squares the king can move to, because the king can't go here. So if I add, say, a knight, that's a mate, or that would be a mate. If I add a bishop on this diagonal, that would be a mate. If I had a rook somewhere, so the rook could be down here, that's a mate, or the rook could be down here. So that's another kind of mate. Okay, so I wonder if there's any other things. Okay, so that's most of the two-piece combinations. Okay, so we have, there's a few others, I'll just do a few more. Okay, we could have a rook. Okay, so do it from scratch. Two pawns can't do it. Pawn and knight can't do it. Pawn and bishop can't do it. Two bishops can't do it. Two rooks can do it. Okay, we know how they do it. So that's just a standard two-rook checkmate. Two rooks can do it, then two rooks can do it. So two knights can do it. Sorry, rook and knight can do it, something like this. Or if I change that knight to a bishop, have a checkmate, something like this, where the rooks move down. Checkmate. And so that's rook and knight, rook and bishop, rook and rook. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so this time we're going to move the pawn in front of the king. Okay, so now the king can come out here or here, so we can get a back rank checkmate if we add a rook and we add a pawn. That would make a checkmate. The king cannot escape the back rank. If I move the pawn, place it with a bishop, because the bishop controls the same square, that is also a mate. If I move the bishop, add a knight, that's another checkmate on the back rank. Okay, so I've got a number of checkmates there. Other checkmates are going to be sort of difficult. What we can do is add a queen, and all I have to do is cover this square. So a pawn would make it checkmate. That would be similar to if that was a rook, or if I had a bishop somewhere controlling the square from the distance, that would be a mate. Or if I had a rook controlling the square from the distance, it will be mate. Okay, so I've got a few checkmates like that. Okay, now we can look at the pawn being here. So these are going to be very similar to the ones over here. So I can't do it with two pawns, pawn and knight, pawn and bishop, two bishops, rook and bishop we can do it. Okay, so we could have a rook, goes to the back, that's one checkmate. Rook and knight, we can't do it. A rook and queen, of course we can do it, because the queen can do anything the bishop can. The queen could also be over here, say. And then we've got can do it with a queen and a knight, with the knight checking. So it's very easy to checkmate with the queen. With another, the queen could be here with another piece defending it. So like this, the king has no moves, so I can add a knight here or here, and that would be mate. Okay, so I'll have a look at some. This time I'll remove the pawn and give back a rook beside the king. So we've seen this mate already, where lone queen mates against king and rook. If I remove that queen, another mate is if I can get a rook on this square. As long as the rook is defended by anything at all, even just a humble pawn, could be defended by a knight or bishop or another rook, that'll be a checkmate. Another kind of checkmate is on the side, with this square being covered by anything at all, even a pawn. So we've got a few checkmates there. Funnily enough, if I had a knight here, it's almost mate. I just have to cover this square, so I get a mate going with this. And it's probably most of the patterns I could show you with the king next to a rook. There's also patterns if you move these across, because that's the position that the king and rook are going to be in after the castle. So we need to cover all these squares. So a common one is to have the queen here. That'd be mate, because the king can't go here because of the rook. So if anything guards the queen at all, whether it's a pawn, a knight, a rook. The rook can be on the file or the rank somewhere, or a bishop. Okay, that will be a mate, so that's an important checkmate with the king and rook in that position. And now let's see, what are some other ones? Interesting one is with two rooks. So if there's two rooks here, white goes check, king goes over, rook check, king goes over, mate. So we've got a checkmate with two rooks. So I don't think a rook and knight can do it, or rook and bishop. Now I've got a few with, the rook could be here too. That's illegal how the rook get there. Could put a queen there instead, so the queen might have moved in on the table. Okay, so we could have a queen here and the rook checking, that would be a mate. And we could have a queen checking on this file, and all we have to do is cover this square. We cover it with a rook, cover it with a knight, cover that square with the bishop. Okay, so that it covers quite a few patterns with a king with one with a rook next to it. Just have a look at the king with a bishop next to it. So if we put the king in the corner, the only square black can move to is here. So if we add another piece, where it's a pawn, a knight, a bishop, etc., that's going to be a mate with the king in the corner. And yeah, so that's some of the common mating patterns with a king with one piece next to it. So thank you for watching.